welcome to my video. My name is Ajane. For those of you who are new, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about documenting. I have another video about documentation as a social worker, as a medical social worker, hospital social worker. So I have some more tips for you guys, and this video will be focused on about 4 to 5 tips. I say 4 to 5 because they're basically all going to be meshed to make one good note. So I'm going to have on the cards and also at the end of the video the first tip video that I did a while back, so you guys will be able to access that as well, and I hope that this helps. So let's get straight into the video. Okay guys, so I have my notes right here on my laptop, so if you see me looking over here, it's because I'm just making sure that I'm staying on task and that I'm being as clear and concise as I possibly can be. In the last video that I did for documentation, like a tips video, I had so many issues. Like I filmed the whole video and like more than 1/3 of it, like 2/3 of the video ended up not recording. So we're not gonna have that same juju come over in this video. So making sure that everything works out perfectly so that everything is able to flow as smoothly as possible. So let's get into it. The first tip I have is to be clear, consistent, concise, and organized, especially if your organization is still on the paper trail. There are some organizations who are slow to moving into programs, or the type of work that you do is not necessarily on a program, but you still have a lot of paper, or you don't have certain capabilities like scanning in paperwork into a patient's chart, or attaching it to a patient somehow electronically. That's okay. I didn't want to just exclude you guys as well. And a big part of being a social worker is that like not everything is electronic, or patients aren't always able to have internet services or even a phone. So sometimes having paper is the only way to communicate and provide resources to your patients. So to be clear, consistent, concise, and organized is a big part of making sure that you can access your documents. So documentation, like I said in the first video, is huge. It is storytelling. It's in the third person. You want to make sure that you include as many details and are very descriptive in the way that you write your notes, so that there's no confusion, there is no misunderstanding of what actually took place with your encounter with the patient. You want to make sure that your patients understand everything that you've explained to them or provided with them. And so even in my notes, I put patient verbalized understanding. And so make sure that you're clear, that you're getting straight to the point, that you're not adding a whole bunch of fluff. I said that it's storytelling, but I'm not saying that you have to be super descriptive as to what the patient's wearing. Only time that's really necessary is if a patient is normally well appeared when you have an encounter, and then they come in with holes in their clothes and, you know, maybe rips and blood on it and dirt, and that's not typically their normal clothes, or that's not your typical way that you see them. I think that's important to include in the note. But you don't want to just have a whole bunch of fluff, a whole bunch of extra details word by word. It's not necessarily, you have to include the reason why you are meeting with the patient, any descriptive details, and any important details, any important quotes to include what you provided the patient, how you provided assistance or resources, and make sure that everything is consistent and concise throughout the span of your notes. So don't have really good notes one day and then really bad, poor notes with no description, no details. You have to make sure that things are consistent, the way that you document, the format that you use. Try to be consistent along all of your documentation throughout your encounters with your patients and while you're charting in the chart. Organization is also important, guys. You want to make sure that you're organized and that you are making sure that the paperwork that you give, you include that in the notes. So I'm not saying that you have to copy and paste word for word the documentations or the resources, but say gave housing resources, was social work explained to patient how to access these resources online. Social work provided patient with diaper bank information, different places where she can access diapers in the St. Louis area. And then I'll list maybe 3 out of like 15 places, maybe the top 3 closest to her that we discussed. Patient was given WIC resources. Social worker provided patient with resources for WIC in her community. So maybe I gave her 2 different WIC resources or addresses and phone numbers and hours, and I usually will include that in my note, because just in case I need to recall that information, or if another social worker wants to then give them the same information, if they lose it or if they have another encounter, I'm not there, then they'll be able to get that information back. So it's important to have all of those documents organized. Also have more common documents that you give out. You see that yourself giving out, like housing resources. Like for me, I work on labor and delivery, so I do a lot of baby resources. I do a lot of WIC resources, transportation and things like that. I already have those things printed out, so that if a doctor calls me and says, hey, this patient's having insurance information, I then look in the chart to see what insurance they have, and I already have the different insurances printed out, so that I can just take it, and when I go to the room with them and see the patient, it's already printed out. I don't have to stress about it, or if I'm not by a computer, I'm really busy, it's already printed out. It's already in my little bag of goodies. So I suggest that you guys doing that. It makes your documentation really easy. It makes your encounters with your patients really easy, and it makes the hospital understand exactly what went on between you and the patient. The second tip is document same day as much as possible, especially as soon as you can, to update the medical team and staff. And then you aren't overwhelmed, guys. It's so important to document same day. So if you have met with a patient at 8 o'clock in the morning and you don't document until 8 o'clock the next day, sometimes it happens. You have to put late entry into that document, especially if it's the next day, just so that the staff is all aware that you met with the patient on December 2nd, but the note is reading December 3rd. So you just want to clarify that social worker met with the patient on December 2nd. This is a late entry from December 2nd and social worker encounter with the patient. So you want to make sure that you document as soon as possible, because there will be times, especially if you're in a medical hospital setting, where the staff will call you and ask you questions even though you already put it in the chart, or they'll call and ask you because they don't think that you met with the patient, or they don't think that the patient's been helped or assisted or provided with resources, especially if the doctors or the nurses have asked you and specifically wanted social work interaction with this patient. You want to make sure that the staff knows that you've made contact, that you've spoken with them, that everybody's on the same accord, because you'll get overwhelmed really easily, especially if you are on a busy floor or if you work in the emergency room. You have to get those notes in as soon as possible, and sometimes it does take a little bit of delay, but make sure that you carve time out to write your documents and to make sure that they're in there as soon as you possibly can get them in there. And sometimes I've even started to write my notes while I'm meeting with the patient, and you have to be really careful with this, and maybe I'll make a video about that, but you have to be really careful about this, because you don't want the patient to feel like you're not listening to them, or that everything that they say is going to be written down, or they're not going to have the opportunity to really explain themselves. Some people get scared and nervous when you're writing as they're talking, and they're like, oh, what did I just say? So just document as soon as you possibly can. It does help with just keeping organized, keeping consistent, making sure that you remember the things that your patient explained to you or told you. You're able to recall things a lot better when you do it as soon as possible, and sometimes even in the room with the patient. So just keep that in mind, because you want the medical team, you want others to be on the same page as you as far as discharge planning, as far as assistance goes, and vice versa. I mean, you want to know what's going on with your patient as far as medically goes. You want to make sure that the doctor is, addressing some of the needs. So you want to make sure that you're staying on top of their discharge. So if the doctor doesn't write their note, you don't know what's going on. And sometimes it's hard to get in touch with other medical professionals, especially when you're working on a busy floor. So just make sure that you are documenting the same day as soon as possible, as much as possible. Third tip, put valuable information in the chart or note. Resources you provided, documents you gave, documents you went over, patient has signed, how you gave this patient this information. This kind of goes back to tip number 1. I want to just, like I said, stress the importance of including some of the resources that you put or you gave to your patient in that note, and making sure that you are able to copy in the number or the times or the addresses that you provided the patient with. So sometimes I say social worker provided patient with WIC resources in her community. Patient was handed a physical copy of WIC resources and also a maps direction. Was provided with directions to the WIC resources in her community from her home. And then I'll put in, that WIC site, that number, that address, the times that they're open, discuss with patient verbalized understanding. Patient was encouraged to contact social worker if she has any other questions or concerns. And so that allows me that if she were to call and say, hey, I kind of lost that paper that you gave me, or I don't have my phone, it's broken. When I put the number in, I don't know where to go, then I'll be able to say, oh, okay, let me check my note really quick. And then I'll be able to recall that information and tell them, so that I'm not also like, well, I don't have time right now. Can I give you a call back in 5 minutes? I have to look it up. Give me 1 second. And they're already in the car trying to get there. So it's good to just have information that you provided to them within the chart already easily accessed and accessible to you as well. So don't just hand things off and not know that information yourself, because sometimes you won't see that patient maybe in like another 5 weeks, and they're like, do you remember that primary care doctor that you told me was covered under my insurance that accepted also, it was, accepting new patients? And you're like, no, I don't. But it's good to have that stuff in the chart so that you're able to put that valuable information in the chart. And it also helps the doctors know, like my doctor at my clinic that I work at, we help patients with primary care appointments, with psychiatry appointments, with treatment appointments, and I put in the date that they're supposed to go. I put in when I'm allowed to verify treatment, who I spoke with, who their counselor is, and so it's easy and better to have all of the information as you research it. Just copy and paste on a document and then find what's necessary as invaluable information to put in the chart. So I hope that makes sense, is to just make sure that you're going over that. My office, we're fortunate enough to work with Epic, and Epic Systems is where we document. That's where all of the census of the hospitals work with. And through Epic, once I have a patient sign a release of information, or we get releases of information, or we get other medical documents from other facilities or hospitals or clinics, we're able to scan that and attach that to that patient's chart so that that's all there. And if I'm working from home, I don't have to have that release of information, like a physical hard copy with me. It's already in the chart, and I can just fax it over if I need to verify anything. So if that's something that your organization does, or you're not sure, I would check on that, because that's easy to do instead of like trying to carry different documents, especially if you are a person who works remote or you work half day in the office or a hybrid situation. So really good, and it's easy. So also to include in that is, like I said, to include numbers, addresses, fax numbers, contact information. If you talk to family members, if they have family members, just explain briefly, why this information is important. So for example, when I do a Children's Division newborn report, the Children's Division worker will then call me, the one that's assigned to the case. And from there, I put in the chart, social worker received a call from assigned Children's Division, is either Missouri or Illinois. Missouri, Children's Division worker, Jane Doe. Then I put in parentheses, Jane Doe's work number. So if she gives me a desk number and a cell phone number, I put both, and I clarify which one is which. And then I put an email address if I get it, their fax number, and their supervisor's information as well. And I make sure that I'm descriptive and say, this is the assigned worker, this is the number, contact information for this, this, and this, and their supervisor, just in case they cannot be reached. So that's important information to put in there. Put in addresses, like I said, to different resources that you provide for the patient so that you're able to recall that. And also sometimes patients have access to certain records, and so they'll be able to recall that as well. And yeah, this leads me to the last tip is follow up notes. As things progress, add more to your note, or create a new one. As you make progress, you get feedback, you get updates, you get follow-ups. So there are times where, for instance, I make a Children's Division report, and that's as soon as I can do it. That may be at 8:30 that I completed the Children's Division report. I usually get as soon as I finish the online reporting a statement saying that I actually submitted a report, and it's like says the time and the number to call and follow up just in case I don't hear back from anybody. I initially attached that to my initial consult, letting the hospital know that I've met with the patient. I spoke to them about the Children's Division report, and that the report has been made. So it may not be until 1:30 that I actually get a call from the Children's Division reporter, and then they're able to, you know, converse with me back and forth about the patient, and I'm able to like fax over the information. So at that point, I dim my note just because I'm able to. We get about 24-hour grace period where we're able to dim a note, so we're able to make edits. And so at that point, if I say like social worker is awaiting follow-up from Children's Division worker who's assigned to the case, at that point I dim the note, and it saves like how many times I've addended it, what time I went into addend the note. And so I'll change that note and delete it because at this point I've heard back. So I want my note to be consistent and to be able to flow. I want it to be concise. So I then delete that sentence and says social worker then spoke with the assigned Missouri Children's Division worker regarding the family's newborn crisis report. Social worker shared medical information that was necessary and prevalent to the case, and the social worker faxed over a secure fax to the Children's Division worker with the patient's urine drug screens results upon admission and during prenatal care. So, you know, then because I've talked with the worker, that is important information to add to the note. Sometimes social workers, it depends on who you are and the type of styling and notes that you like. Sometimes if the note's really long and I don't think that the hospital staff will get important information throughout the note, I will make a separate note. So it just really depends on you really, but I try to keep all of my notes, especially in one day, to a minimum. I don't want a whole bunch of like social work notes because typically the staff reads the first note, and I want that note, the first one that they click on, to have as much information. So I just kind of like pick and choose as I go. And I can probably go more in depth about this because this is a whole situation, but it's a lot easier than I'm explaining it to be. So as things progress throughout the day, I will addend my note, add it, edit it, make additional updates and follow-ups, different things that I've done throughout the day regarding the case or the patient. And like I said, if it starts to get too long and there's more prevalent information that needs to be added, I'll take what's important from that first note in like a paragraph and put the timestamp on it when that first encounter happened. Like when I made the report at 8:30 and followed up with this social worker, I put it 1:30, followed up with the social worker, you know, the Children's Division worker, and provided her with the medical information and faxed over the urine drug screens, blah, blah, blah. And then 1:40, I'll put a time. This is under that new note, not from the consult note that I originally did, but under the new note, I put, you know, 8:30, 1 o'clock, 1:30, talk to the patient and told patient that Children's Division worker will be making contact and coming up to the hospital to visit with the family. And then 4 o'clock, you know, before I leave, you know, social worker heard back from Children's Division worker stating that she met with the family and will be starting to plan discharge. So then it starts obviously a new day of notes. So I try to make sure that as I get updates, as I get follow-up, as I get more details, as I send things, receive things, that I'm including that in my notes so that the hospital staff knows that I'm constantly and consistently working with the family. I'm constantly, you know, being on top of the things that I'm supposed to be on top of, and then that keeps them updated so that they know, like, okay, we're on track for discharge, or, you know, blah, 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 you know, we need to keep the baby for an additional day, or that's the reason why mom's upset, is because she finally heard back from Children's Division and they decided to petition the court. So these are all things that I put in the note. But I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. I'm so happy to be able to be sharing some tips with you guys, some experiences. The next video, the documentation video, will be another video about examples on how I put scenarios and write them out. So I'll be making up some scenarios and then writing them out so that you guys will be able to see how to take this scenario and write it. It's kind of like a case study that you would do in your undergrad or grad school. So I think that would be kind of fun. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. I hope that you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.